Round 12 of AFL action is in the books, and with round 13 quickly approaching, it is time for us to sit down and reflect on a round that saw some rather outrageous outcomes. Join me as we unpack all the action, get my votes in for the 2026 MVP, as well as looking at my team of the week. This is the round recap. What is going on, YouTube universe? Welcome to the Hip and Shoulder, where we discuss everything Australian rules football. I do apologise for not getting a video out for round 11. I have been very much under the weather. I'm still only just recovering now, but it's not going to hold me back from missing 2 in a week. We are definitely going to be diving in and catching up on a round that, although looked pretty streamlined, we got a couple of outcomes that I think might have surprised a couple of people with just how it played out. Before we dive on in though, let's have a look at the ladder and how it shaped up heading into the round. In first place, we have Fremantle on 40 points, a game clear of second best, who is Sydney, sitting on 36. We then have Geelong sitting on 32 in third, and Hawthorn sitting on 30 in fourth. Rounding out the top 6, we have the Gold Coast Suns and Melbourne, both equally on 28 points. Rounding out the wildcard configuration, placing 7th to 10th, we have Adelaide in 7th, Brisbane in 8th, and Western Bulldogs in 9th, all on 24 points apiece, with Collingwood sitting in 10th on 22 points. From 11th to 13th, we have St Kilda, GWS, and North Melbourne, all equally on 20 points. Port Adelaide sits in 14th on 12 points, trailed by Carlton and West Coast in 15th and 16th respectively on 12 points as well. Richmond in 17th on 8 points, and Essendon, bottom of the barrel, 18th place with 4 points. As I alluded to, round 12 had many outcomes, especially by way of margin, that would have left people scratching their heads. Going into the round, it looked like pretty clean-cut situations were going to go down, and given what we have seen from each team up until this point in time, given we're at the halfway mark, it would have seemed that it would have been a lot easier to decipher how teams would have performed. But the growing trend this season has been not being able to lock in from a team one week to the next and expect the exact same outcome. And that's exactly what went down in the very first game. St Kilda hosting Hawthorn down at Marvel Stadium. Everybody would have expected Hawthorn to win, but I don't think many would have expected Hawthorn to walk away with a 52-point win. In a game where Ross Lyon's defensive structures should have held up, they were absolutely blown out of proportion, and Hawthorn just got a stranglehold on St Kilda from the very first bounce. It was one of the worst opening halves of football I have seen from any team over any period of time. And when you consider the fact that at this point in time of the season, St Kilda have the same win-loss record that they had last year, after they've just gone and splurged millions of dollars to bring in Tom De Koning, to bring in Sam Flanders, to bolster Nasiah Wanganeen-Malira's contract, to bring in Jack Silvani, to bring in Liam Ryan. And it just blows my mind that they can go and target all these players and splash all this cash, but still be sitting in the very same precarious position they found themselves in last year. I just don't... It's unfathomable that we've had Michael Voss quit his job. We've seen Brad Scott sacked. But it seems Ross Lyon seems to avoid many conversation when it comes to his position as coach at St Kilda. He's got the exact same game plan he had when he was a St Kilda coach like 10 odd years ago. He's come back to the club with the same game plan, and it's taken them nowhere. And nobody's asking these questions. I just don't understand how some coaches can skim by, on coattails and like the skin of their teeth, but other coaches are fed to the wolves and thrown under the bus more often than not. It just blows my mind. Having a look at the match timeline, you can see just how abysmal a performance this was from St Kilda, especially in the opening half. At quarter time, Hawthorn led 3-2-20 to 2 behinds. At halftime, 8-7-55 led 5 behinds. 3-quarter time, 13-11-89 led 6-7-43, and the full-time score was 18-11-119, defeating 9-13-67. I just could not get my head around the fact that they were just dog-walked all game, especially in that first half. Every time they would look to get into space, it would be cut off by a defender, and just the launch back from Hawthorn was absolutely incredible. Everybody talks about the Orange Tsunami when discussing GWS and their transitional game from half back to half forward, and I feel not many people recognise that Hawthorn do exactly the same. Now, people like to call it hockball, for lack of a better term, but just when they get their run and carry game going, Hawthorn look deadly, and it's also impacted by the fact that the players they brought in. They brought Will Day into this game, they had Jack Gunston return, and statistically, you can break it down and see that Hawthorn obviously struggled without Jack Gunston up forward. They send Blake Hardwick out of necessity down there the other week. He kicks 5. I think in this game he kicked 4 goals, but it was probably more junk time goals. The game was already done. Foot was taken off the pedal and he got a couple of easy ones late. But that just furthers discussion points about Hawthorn. A few weeks ago, I mentioned I thought a talking point, or what we learned about Hawthorn in that particular game, was that they don't have depth. They lack depth. Without the likes of Gunston out there, who's going to be the next to fire? I feel if they went down the route of playing Blake Hardwick as a permanent forward, you could have Gunston and Hardwick combined for 10 goals a week. They would be one of the best, if not the best duo in the competition forward half of the ball. That's an insane concept to talk about, but when we look at it in isolation, while we do have a Hardwick that can pop up, he's then taken out of that defensive role, taken up forward. That leaves a hole in defence, and that is where the conversation returns about Hawthorn's depth. If they lose Gunston, which in the next couple of years they'll do so due to retirement, just due to his age, if they then send a Hardwick up forward, do they have the coverage to bring in a defender, especially if the likes of Barras, who is currently out injured, if they lose Sicily to injury, if Josh Battle goes down to injury, can they afford to move all those magnets? Do they have enough depth in their VFL team that currently isn't getting game time that can step up and fill the void? Conversation to be had, maybe. Unfortunately, it doesn't get any easier for St Kilda out of this game either, because Sam Flanders, one of their highly touted recruits that they brought in on a sizable pay packet, if you don't mind, has ruptured his Achilles and will miss the next 12 months of football. So not only are you looking at the rest of this season, but you're looking at time heading into next season as well, unless a recovery happens, quicker than originally planned, which is gut-wrenching. As a neutral supporter, watching every team play over the course of the weekend, you hate to see a player go down, especially a player that has come into a club like he has and is fighting to turn things around. And you can see the desire to want to win from Flanders when he takes to the field for St Kilda. So losing a player like that, so detrimental to the cause. Turning attention to the team statistics, Hawthorn did get a jump on them, and obviously the scoreboard does allude to that. They led disposals 429 to 387. However, only had 12 more inside 50s. So Hawthorn gave up opportunity forward half of the ball to St Kilda, and Hawthorn have one of, if not the best defensive structures in the comp. So to still allow 44 inside 50s, like, when you have a look at it, okay, it's down from their average of 51, but to have access like that to score and still fail to register, especially in that first half, was just so painstakingly hard to watch. And my old man is a St Kilda supporter, and just the look on his face during that first half, you don't have to say any words, just the body language sometimes speaks volumes. Disposal efficiency around the ground, St Kilda ran at 74.9%, Hawthorn ran at 80.4%, and inside 50, despite the 12 inside 50 differentiation between the two, both of them ran at over 55% efficiency inside that forward half. So both getting decent return, and it's kind of it's kind of weird seeing 56.8% for St Kilda, given the fact with their inability to score in that first half. But hey, you know, stats don't lie, apparently. Around the stoppage, Hawthorn did have the better of them in the ruck, which, again, I question how. Because Tom De Koning and Rowan Marshall, as a collective, should be working well enough here. They had 25 hitouts. Hawthorn managed to 39. The clearance game was only 1 by 1. Hawthorn getting the one clearance better, and that has been a common trend this year throughout all games as well. One team might dominate the hitouts, but the clearance game is a little bit more clean cut. It's a little bit more divisive and in way of both teams being able to get up. More often than not, we see a team heavily skewed in hitouts, but the clearances go against them. So good to see here Hawthorn getting return for effort in that centre square, and obviously around the ground as well. Stoppage clearances, that's where they coughed up a little bit. That's where St Kilda was able to get on their terms around the stoppage. 125 contested possessions to 108 the way of St Kilda. Uncontested possessions, though, 52 to Hawthorn, and that's just how Hawthorn run the ball. They like that run and carry game, but they still have the ability to take marks, slow the game down, get things on their terms. But we know St Kilda, they, regardless of whether they've got the momentum or the flow, they love to kick backwards and sideways, and it's just a game plan that I feel is very outdated and is preventing St Kilda from taking any forward steps. Just my personal opinion. I personally feel they're at a point where a fresh faces coach would serve them so well, because a new game plan is probably what they're crying out for the most. Having a look at the individual efforts for this game, obviously St Kilda missing a few players. You have Sam Flanders go down, which is huge. Haven't had Nasiah Wangani-Malira running around there for a hot minute, who is arguably their best player. You still, in a losing effort of 52 points, have Jack Sinclair putting up 33 disposals and, you know, putting in a great effort off of half-back. Darcy Wilson, off of the wing, has been great for St Kilda. He had 25 disposals. Jack Silvani, utilised as a forward, kicks 3 goals 3, takes 10 marks, has 14 disposals. Cal Wilkie plucks 7 marks and has 23 defensively. But outside of that, it drops off a little bit. Max Hall is a revelation for St Kilda this year. He had 26, he laid a couple of tackles, had a few clearances. Garcia in the same kind of boat. But then when you look at the highest, you know, rated players on the field, you can nitpick a couple of St Kilda players here and there, but it's all Hawthorn all the way. And that's where young teams like St Kilda, like Hawthorn, are divided into two categories, because Hawthorn can rely on a Gunston or a Sicily, but they've got these young kids coming through that are all starting to come into their own. Connor McDonald, Cam McKenzie, Massimo D'Ambrosio, Nick Watson, Jack Silvani, Jai Newcomb, probably not as young, but you get the sentiment. Josh Ward, all these players really starting to elevate their game to the next level. Whereas for St Kilda, I still feel they're heavily reliant on particular players. They're lucky that players like Max Hall and Hugo Garcia have taken the next step and they're able to take that forward progression. But I feel, and I said it when it happened at the start of the year when these trades went down for St Kilda. St Kilda are in a mindset, at least I believe, of star players making a star team. Instead of, and my argument is star players don't make a star team. You need role players. You need, you know, the ball movers. You need the down and dirty, getting into the contest type of players. And investing in all of these flashy players that can do things here and there isn't going to equate to much if things don't start to gel together. And this is where I feel there's a disconnect with the game style that's being played. This too defensive game that Ross Lyon loves to play is getting absolutely squashed, because what happens to St Kilda on that turnover is if they fuck that defensive play up and the ball gets turned over, they get exposed. And Richmond even did that to them a few weeks ago. Even though St Kilda emphatically won that game quite comfortably, Richmond was still able by hand to run rings around that defensive line as soon as it breaks. And if Richmond can do that as one of the more below average performing teams this year, imagine coming up against a Hawthorn, coming up against a Geelong, a Fremantle, a GWS even. You'll get absolutely ripped to shreds. Looking at the players that I handpicked for this game, there are a couple that I feel are a little bit stiff. I feel Nick Watson could be mentioned here. He kicked a couple of goals. He also had, I think it was close enough to game high score involvements as well. If you don't mind, I'll take a quick little look here just to make sure I'm not going absolutely insane. And he actually did. That makes me want to pivot on the spot here. Do I make a pivot? No, I don't think I do, because I think that's more emphatic there. Oh, you know, yeah. Look, he only scored. Yeah, you know what? I'm pivoting. I'm pivoting on the spot. We have done this before, and I'm doing it again. Originally, I had Jack Gunston in for one vote here off of his 10 disposals, 5 marks, 5 goals, 9 score involvements. But you put into equation, of those 9 score involvements, he kicked 5 goals too. We turn attention to Nick Watson, who now gets the 1 vote. He had 21 disposals, of which he had 8 kicks and 13 handballs. He had 3 marks, 4 tackles, 2 clearances, 242 metres gained, kicked 2 goals, had 2 goal assists, and then we look at score involvements. He had a game high 12 score involvements with 8 contested possessions. I am very happy to make that pivot with him. Turning attention to the 2 vote, I did give it to Connor McDonald. I feel he's having a breakout season this year and could be a smoky, not for the final All-Australian team, but to be named in that team of 40 odd that gets named and then gets lowered down. On a wing, I can see it happening. 26 disposals, 7 were contested, 7 marks, 4 tackles, 3 clearances, 284 metres gained, 1 goal, 2 goal assists, and 8 score involvements. And best on ground, the captain, James Sicily, getting it done. Loved his work. 33 disposals, 9 contested, 10 marks, 3 tackles, 600 metres gained, 1 score involvement. He's not going to get many score involvements playing out of full back, but he was like the great rock of Gibraltar back there. Could not get anything past him. He was very much the quarterback that was setting out, you know, zones and telling players where to go. And when you've got somebody leading the charge like that, defensively, you are absolutely eating good. Hawthorn are going to finish a top 4 team this year. I'm convinced of it. Their best is amongst the best in the comp. It's not the best in the comp because I think they're a better, but it's hard to argue that when they're flying, they are very, very hard to stop. St Kilda, on the other hand, are they going to be a wildcard contender, or do they fall outside of that configuration? Because at this point in time, I think there need to be more questions asked about where they're at. And I feel, again, and I'll touch on it once more, all these coaches that have been thrown under the bus, we've already lost 2 this year. How does Ross Lyon continue getting away with what he's doing? You tell me. Friday night saw an absolute blockbuster play out between Carlton and Geelong at the MCG. Now, foolishly, I thought Geelong would win this because just going off of what I've seen over recent weeks, they have looked vastly impressive. But the one thing I've failed to note is out of the last handful of times these guys have gone head-to-head, Carlton have actually got the wood on them. And I honestly didn't think Carlton had it in them. But Carlton walk away the 4-point victors here. But it's not without controversy. We will talk about the match timeline first, and then we'll talk about the biggest discussion point that came out of this game. At quarter time, Geelong led 4-4-28 to 1-3-9. Halftime, Carlton stemmed the flow, but Geelong still led 6-8-44 to 5-9-39. 3-quarter time, Carlton took a slim lead, 9-11-65, leading 9-10-64, and the final scoreline saw Carlton 12-16-88 defeat Geelong 12-12-84. Now, opening minutes of the game. Ball is bouncing in Geelong's forward line. It gets into the goal square. Ollie Dempsey grabs the ball, taps it down onto his shin below the knee. Daylight between him and his opponent, but the fact that his opponent runs directly into David Roden knocks David Roden out of the way. David Roden calls a behind, and because Nick Newman decides to play on quickly, due to the ruling that was made by the AFL a few weeks back, if you do recall, in the St Kilda game, about 90 seconds of play went between a behind and gameplay. The ball gets brought all the way back and Rowan Marshall gets a free kick in front of goal because he got paid a mark. That was a mark. AFL have come out and said if the ball is brought back into play, they will no longer bring the ball back for an ARC review. So the fact that Nick Newman plays on doesn't give the ARC enough time to bring the ball back. And a goal that was 100% a goal goes begging. And a lot of people have been saying Geelong lose by 4. If it's a goal instead of a point, they win by a couple of points instead. Very much not the case, because in hindsight, if that were the case and it was at the end of the game, okay, feel free to argue that, but it was at the start of the game. The script of the game and how things would have played out after that fact would have been so much different had that goal been paid. You can question whether Geelong would have had more momentum after that goal, whether Carlton in the end would have had a bigger comeback. You don't know. There are too many variables that fall into the slot there. It's just hilarious that in that moment, I turned to my dad and I said, how long do you reckon until the AFL come out and say they got it wrong? 11 o'clock the next day. That's all it took. AFL concede, they made a mistake. Now, here's a bigger question. Some might think it's me trying to be funny or whatever the case may be, but for weeks, we have been seeing players copping fines and giving away free kicks for umpire contact. So, the Carlton defender who runs straight into the back of David Roden and bowls him over on the goal line, how is that not a free kick? Or is it only field umpires that are getting free kicks paid against? I don't know. I don't understand. But I just thought, given the rhetoric that we have seen around players getting fined and free kicks being paid because they accidentally, like, barely touch an umpire, a Carlton defender barrels David Roden over on the goal line and no case to answer, I think that was a little bit rich. What is interesting though, and I want to talk about it a little bit more, is I feel, and I've said it for the last 3 weeks, and some people agree, some people disagree. If you're a Carlton fan, I would love to know your thoughts down below. Had there been too far a disconnect between player and coach when Michael Voss was at the helm, that his removal as coach has almost breathed new life into this team? Because they're playing inspired football. They're not having these halftime dropouts. They're not playing the way they were playing under Michael Voss. They're doing different things. I don't know whether that's just attributed to Josh Fraiser coming in and doing his thing, but you got to remember, Josh Fraiser was doing his learning under Michael Voss. So he's still going to be implementing things that he has learnt from Michael Voss. I start to question whether there was too much of a disconnect and players weren't feeling inspired enough to get up and win. Or they weren't motivated enough to go out and execute things because they were done with Michael Voss as a coach. I don't know. Geelong, on the other hand, nothing to worry about. I mean, Geelong do this every year. Geelong can lose games that they're not supposed to lose, and then yet at the pointy end, we see them in a prelim final. They're knocking on the door of a grand final. They don't need to hit the draft hard because people want to just continuously come to play for this club. One of those moments where it's a blip on the radar. They win a couple of games, they'll drop one. They don't rest on their laurels. They don't allow a loss to define them. They come out bigger and better the following week. It's going to happen. I can guarantee it. Turning attention to the team stats, and as we do so, there was only one injury that came out of this game. Lawson Humphries will miss this week with a leg injury. I'm not sure of the extent of that injury, however. This game, surprisingly, Carlton had a bit of a stranglehold on the disposal game. They did have almost 40 disposals more around the ground. It was just really interesting to see how Carlton dominated that disposal game around Geelong. And we know Geelong defensively sound. They love to switch and change. They're quick moving with the ball. And Carlton was just finding ways to shut that down, get hands first on the footy. They had pretty much almost 20 more kicks. They had close enough to 20 more handballs. Inside 50s, they had 6 less inside 50s than Geelong did. Geelong fired at a 46% efficiency inside 50, which is down from their 52% average. Carlton have only been averaging 52% inside forward 50, but kicked at 62% for this game. Just went to a whole new level. It was absolutely insane to see what they did in this game. And this alludes to what we were talking about in the last game. Geelong dominated the hitouts 29-43, but Carlton won the clearance game 44-31. And where they got the better break was around the stoppage. They had 10 more clearances at stoppage and were just able, through the likes of Walsh and Cripps, to absolutely cripple Geelong's, midfield game. They were just able to find space and get the ball moving on their terms. It was quite impressive to watch as a neutral, and I'm not the biggest Carlton fan. When it comes to uncontested possessions, 259 to 221. They had more contested possessions as well. Funnily enough, turned the ball over more. Geelong did have 105 marks for the game to 94 for Carlton. So both of them were happy to take the sting out of the game when they had ball in hand. You know, both of them have a very similar style of ball movement. So it was very interesting to see how they implemented things on the ground. And as far as individual performances go, it was the same culprits for both teams. I think, you know, you expect Ollie Dempsey, Bailey Smith, Jeremy Cameron, Max Holmes. When you talk about better performance on the day, if it's a top 5, those 4 names will often come up more often than not. For Carlton, Sam Walsh is starting to find a bit more continuity in his game. Nick Newman out of defence, starting to look great. Patrick Cripps led the charge. Ben Ainsworth didn't hit the scoreboard with a goal, but was still able to find plenty of it. Billy Wilson is a kid that not many people have been speaking about. I think his role that he has played at Carlton has been sensational. Jarga Smith had a great game. Jacob Wiedering was great in defence. All out great effort from Carlton. This was as gutsy as it was comprehensive when it came to the score at the end of the game. To have Patrick Cripps, who has been criticised by many, including myself, as somebody who doesn't convert shots on goal. He's one of those midfielders that can get plenty of the ball but doesn't have scoreboard impact. For him to take the winning mark and kick the winning goal speaks volumes about this man wanting to just lead the charge and lead this new era of Carlton. And as much as Josh Fraiser has allegedly come out and said he doesn't want the head coaching role, he might not have a choice if he keeps winning games, because I think that the fans will end up saying we want him as coach, and he might just have to abide by them when the time comes. For the votes for this game, pretty straightforward. I did give 1 vote to Sam Walsh. He had 30 disposals, 11 contested, 4 marks, 7 tackles, 7 clearances, 317 metres gained, and 7 score involvements. The 2 vote I gave to Bailey Smith, clearly Geelong's best, and was close to best on ground if you take away some situational things. 35 disposals, 7 contested, 5 marks, 7 tackles, 2 clearances, 723 metres gained, 2 goal assists, 7 score involvements. And best on ground for me, I couldn't look past it. I've given it to Patrick Cripps. I've got preconceived notions about him and the Brownlows and everything surrounding, but he has, especially the last month, he has been playing some incredible football. 30 disposals, 15 of which were contested, 2 marks, 4 tackles, 8 clearances, 318 metres gained, 1 goal and 7 score involvements. Why do I think he was best on ground ahead of Bailey Smith? Not just kicking that winning goal, but his clearance work in that final term when it needed to be won and they needed someone to take charge. Patrick Cripps led the way, and I think that is deserving of acknowledging a best on ground performance. Going to be interesting to see where Carlton go from here. Carlton come up against Essendon this week, so they can make it 4 from 4. Geelong, on the other hand, I feel they can bounce back. I feel, even though they're playing against Adelaide, in Adelaide, I think they can get off the chain a bit. I think they can bounce back. This is games that need to be won, especially with Adelaide. At this point of the season, they're the only club alongside Richmond that haven't beaten a top 10 side. They are winless against anybody in the top 10. So Geelong have chance to bounce back here. Both teams, though, incredible outing, great game of football collectively, and that's what we love as neutral supporters. Games that come down to the wire, both teams throwing everything at it, could not ask for more. The first on Saturday, look, I'm not going to mince words. I would like to get through this one as quickly as we can, because it was Sydney hosting Richmond at the SCG, and I knew comfortably that this was a game where Richmond's back were against the wall. I tipped Sydney by a margin of a minimum 10 goals. I did not think, however, Sydney would walk away with 114 points the better. I, as a Richmond man, watched this game from start to finish and was very much wanting to bury my head in the sand by the end of the game. This is one of those outings where there was very little positivity to take out of the game. I tried to always find light at the end of the tunnel and a positive to cling to, and maybe Jasper Alger kicking 3 goals is the only thing that we can truly cling to from this game, because there was really nothing else. This was as punishing, comprehensive, and one-sided a defeat you will see ever. This was terrible. Now, I think there was a stat I saw, I can't remember how long ago it was, but Sydney defeated Richmond by pretty much this exact same margin, the exact same scores, and the following year or two, Richmond underwent that big bounce back that saw us win premiership. So it might have been 2015 where this kind of all went down the same way. I'm not at all suggesting that it's in the stars that this was going to happen, but boy, we were seeing stars. That's damn fucking sure. Yeah, as the match timeline will break down, quarter time, maybe a little bit of clinging to hope that something could go our way, but boy, this got ugly fast. It was 7-3-45, Sydney leading 4-1-25 at quarter time. 15-7-97 led 7-4-46 at half time. 22-14, 146 led 7-7-49 at three-quarter time. And 25-20, 170 defeated 8-8-56. Final score, Richmond only managing to kick 1 goal for the second half, while Sydney went on to kick a further 10 goals, 13. This could have been and should have been a game where they cracked 200 points. This could have been their biggest score that they have ever registered, and this was without Brodie Grundy. So if there's anything to take away from this game, if you're looking at it through a lens of they beat up a team that has so many injuries and it's a young team, yada yada yada, they still did so without Brodie Grundy, without Tom Papley, without Malcolm Rosas, without some components that make this team infinitely greater. Does that not put the rest of the competition on notice that they did this so emphatically and one-sided? And I just don't understand why there isn't enough respect being paid to Sydney's name. This game, people are coming out saying, oh, they only played Richmond. They only beat Richmond. Now, that I feel is a little bit concerning on the way of, as a Richmond fan. Obviously, we're an easy beat team at this point in time. There's no mincing words there. The injury list has blown out to be an absolute farce, and even with the kids that we can get onto the park, underexposed, not many games into them, the senior boys aren't living up and standing up to expectation. This is a season I would well and truly like to just get a red marker and just put a line straight through and say 2026 never happened in the way of Richmond, but it's happening, and we're seeing it all play out. It was rough. It was really rough. I just don't know where for Richmond from here. Sydney obviously can take a lot of momentum out of this, but what does this do to a young rebuilding club? It does nothing. It does nothing but destroy the morale of every kid that played that game. It's a dark, dark day. It was a dark, dark day. Just one of the main points from this game was Sydney went and scored 107 of their points from 74 intercept chains. It was insane. Richmond only scored 29 points from 59 intercept chains. So it's the most that any team has scored by intercept for the season. Isaac Heaney scored a career high 5 goals, 13 score involvements. It's one of those games where you sit back as a supporter, and as much as you want to try to make excuses just don't cut it. And that's where conversation now turns to whether Adam Uze is the man for the job at Richmond. We can all sit there and say, Uze hasn't been able to put game plans into place because he hasn't had the squad to put out there. Our best 23 is not available, and that's fact. Don't get me wrong. But how long are we going to drag that excuse out for? We still haven't seen any forward progress under Uze. We see glimpses of something. We've seen over recent weeks glimpses of handball chains and running the ball that looks exciting, and we were able to get on top of in patches St Kilda, Adelaide. We beat Essendon, so it's there. But then we retreat back into this kick mark game that is so blasé and boring, and just it opens us up to hurt. I don't know. What did we learn from this game? Sydney are a serious contender and will be now for a very long time, given the list they have. And on the flip side, Richmond have all this young talent, but unavailability is forcing us into a pocket of despair. It's if we had all these kids fit in a couple of years' time, when Tasmania enters the competition, Richmond will be primed, because all of these guys have played 50-odd games and we're starting to get some continuity in our game. But to think, Taj Houghton, Sam Lawler, Josh Smiley, all collectively have not played a game together at all in this game against Sydney. Of all those first round picks we had when we had those 7-odd first round picks in that one draft, only one of those draft picks played that game. All other draft picks are out injured. So, as much as I can sit here and talk injury, as unfortunate as it is, I don't think it's going to chop it. We need to be able to put a team on the park that's going to, fight and live up to expectation. And unfortunately, that was not the case in this game. Sydney did have McInerney go down with an ankle and Melican with a hamstring, so I don't know how the progress of those injuries is going to hurt. Melican probably more so from a defensive point of view hurts, but McInerney is in all-Australian form this year. His ability to just get involved with score involvements is absolutely insane. So definitely two that they're going to want to keep an eye on. I'm just thankful we got through a game with no injury on Richmond's side, which is fucking very, very fortunate given the circumstances. Again, you see this score line, it's comprehensive. It's one-sided Sydney all the way with these contests here. Disposal count, 437 to 324. They had 50 more kicks. They had over 60 more handballs. They had 73 to 47 inside 50s. Richmond only struck at a 38% inside 50 efficiency, which is insane. The only thing I suppose is, here's a stat that we can take away. 34 hit-outs to 16. And Richmond only lose the clearance game by 2. I think we can hang our heads high in that retrospect, given the form that Heaney and Warner and Rowbottom and these players are getting for that centre line for Sydney. Maybe we walk away and that's the point of difference. That's where we walk away with a win. 104 marks to 71, so they were just eating everything. They were playing slow, they were moving it around, then they were taking the piss with ball in hand. Incredible. Richmond were in front for 2.5 minutes out of the whole game, which came at 51 seconds into the game. We kicked our first goal, and that was the biggest lead we had all game. That's the biggest lead we had all game, unfortunately. As far as the player stats go, I will give an honourable mention, I suppose, to Tim Taranto. I thought he dug deep. Jacob Hopper, surprisingly not too bad. I still think it's time for him to go at the end of the year. Jack Ross and Jasper Elgar had good outings as well, but again, all the highest rated players here are all Sydney. Heaney, Curnow, Warner, McCartan, Laddams, Blakey, Sarong, McLean, Rowbottom, Jordan, McDonald, Bice, Wicks. Keep lining them up and keep naming them. So I will name the 3 that I've given votes to in this particular game. I gave 1 vote to Chad Warner, 32 disposals, 9 contested, 6 marks, 1 tackle, 5 clearances, 811 metres gained, 3 goals, 1 goal assist, and 15 score involvements. 2 votes I gave to Charlie Curnow, 18 disposals, 6 were contested, 9 marks, 1 tackle, 330 metres gained, 8 goals, 1 goal assist, and 14 score involvements. And best on ground, Isaac Heaney. Could be argued currently at this point in time as the in-form player of the competition. 32 disposals, 11 were contested, 7 marks, 7 tackles, 5 clearances, 508 metres gained, 5 goals, 2 goal assists, 13 score involvements. Richmond get the bye this week. Thank Christ for that. Sydney, on the other hand, are looking to continue to do some damage, and they run into St Kilda. Some people are foolishly thinking St Kilda are going to upset them at the SCG. This has another potential 10-plus goal win written all over it. Sydney are here, and Sydney are here to play. And this isn't the Sydney that we saw make the grand final a couple of years ago and got dog walked by Geelong. This is a Sydney that can finally do some damage, and boy, I wouldn't be I wouldn't want to be lining up against them in the deeper end of September, because I'm telling you right now, they're fit, they're firing, and they're hungry for it. The Gabba played host to Brisbane, taking on Fremantle, and coming into this game, Brisbane had fumbled 2 games that in the past we would have seen them at least be competitive in, but they have been knocked from pillar to post over the last month. Coming into this game, they ran roughshod into Fremantle, who had won 11 games on the trot. Their biggest winning, streak in club history. They're on an absolute run, Fremantle. And at this current point in time, regardless of whether you want to look at who they've played and who they've beaten, they're playing the best brand of football in the competition. Very similar to the brand that Sydney plays. And there's no, there's no coincidence that Fremantle and Sydney are sitting in first and second, given the brand of football they're playing. They are playing some great football. It is absolutely sensational to watch. As I choke on my words, I apologize. I don't know what's going on with Brisbane. I really don't. It can't be a personnel thing, because they're not missing too many out of their core lineup here. Maybe Ryan Lester, maybe Jackson Payne, maybe Dane Zorko. Well, definitely Dane Zorko. Probably definitely Ryan Lester. But outside of that, they've pretty much got everybody they need. I mean, you can't really say Lincoln McCarthy, because they ran most of last year without him, so he can be one kind of left to the side. Eric Hipwood probably and definitely changes the look of that forward half, but they've got many premiership winning players available currently. They have still a very talented list going out each and every week, and they're just failing to get the job done. I just don't know where the disconnect is going, because this game, albeit close at half time, Fremantle went on a rip in the third quarter and ran away with the game and put it beyond a shadow of a doubt. At quarter time, they led 3-5-23 to Brisbane's 1-4-10, and at half time, they led 7-7-49 to 3-10-28. Now, you could probably look at it from a different perspective here and say, well, if they kicked, 7 goals 3 instead of 3 goals 10, then it would have been much more respectable. They would have been in the game a hell of a lot earlier. And yes, I do tend to agree. But Brisbane shoot themselves in the foot with inaccuracy. It's not the first time we've seen inaccuracy creep in with this team and cost this team games. At three-quarter time, Fremantle led 13-11-89 to 6-13-49, and the final score saw Fremantle 15-13, 103 defeat Brisbane 10-18-78. Boy, oh boy, both teams had 28 scoring shots on goal. Fremantle walk away the victor here. Now, Fremantle actually more impacted out of this game in the way of injury, because both Cox and I believe it was Johnson went down with injuries, and Brisbane have lost Kitty Coleman, I believe, potentially to a hamstring. I'm not entirely too sure. But again, boy, this is comprehensive on the way of just disposal count. Just Fremantle had way much more of the ball. They just denied access to Brisbane all game. 364 disposals to 298. In the grand scheme of things, when you think about it, Fremantle led the charge 364, 298 in disposal count. Fremantle led the disposal count 364 to 298, which is a little down on Freo's average, but well down on Brisbane's average, 70 less even, which is absolutely insane. It was the handball game of Fremantle that absolutely ripped Brisbane to shreds. They had 65 more handballs, and we know Sydney, Fremantle, the brand that they play is they love to get that intercept, and then they like to chain ball with handball. Chain handballs is what I was trying to say. They like to chain the handball game from defense to forward line, and they do it no better than any other club in the competition. Absolutely incredible to watch. Pair that with 78% disposal efficiency, 61% inside 50 efficiency. Fremantle lost the clearance game. See, this is a hit-out game that was won by one singular hit-out the way of Brisbane, but Brisbane had 11 more clearances. They dominated the stoppage clearance, and Fremantle were just able to get the ball back on their terms and make them work for it. From that 60-odd handball differential, they had pretty much 60-odd uncontested possessions. So it's just that run and carry, the linking up with the handballs and working around contests, whether it's in close, getting the ball out long, that is what is chopping up defenses. This is why earlier in the video when I mentioned Ross Lyon's defensive game plans like Fremantle thrive on absolutely dismantling that type of play. You're not going to be able to consist as a club if you're going to stop and just chip around and hope that's going to be good enough, because teams like Fremantle are going to absolutely eat that up. The marking game, surprisingly, for all those handballs was actually won by Brisbane by one singular mark. Unreal. Absolutely unreal. When you think about Brisbane and the dominance they had last year in the grand final, and not seeing any glimpses of that dominance at all this year, a little bit concerning for me. I know it's still early days, we're only halfway through, but Brisbane at this point in time are looking at being a potential like wild card team, not a top 6 team. It's quite concerning given the fact that many would have had them for a three-peat this year. And when you collectively look at all the efforts here, again, out of the top 10, 3 belong to Brisbane. Out of the top 20, a further 3. So 14 of the top 20 all belonging to Fremantle just speaks to the volume of how comprehensive Fremantle was in this game. And they're not dependent on the same players. Like Matthew Johnson is within the top 6 ranked on the field. Patrick Voss is up there. Carl Warner is up there. Nathan O'Driscoll, Murphy Reid, Carl Wagner, Judd McVie, Sam Switkowski, Heath Chapman. Not names that you're used to hearing. Like, you're used to hearing like a Tracy or an Amos or a Brayshaw or a Sarong, if Sarong was playing, obviously. And they won this without Sarong, who is their better midfielder. So Fremantle are only going to get stronger. And Fremantle had a couple of players go down with injury. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out. Now, when it comes to the votes for this game, it's one of those things where I look at the impact, I look at the scoreline, and yet I feel the votes that I've given out are justly deserved, and 2 of the 3 are going to Brisbane players despite the loss, and best on ground is going to a Brisbane player too, despite the loss. Now, you can throw a blanket over a handful, I feel, for the 1 and the 2, but I landed on Darcy Wilmot for the 1 vote. A lot of people not really recognising him in coaches' votes and things of that nature, but he had 26 disposals, 5 were contested, 12 marks, 3 tackles, 3 clearances, 544 metres gained, 1 goal assist and 5 score involvements. He's having some sort of a year in defence. And if we're looking at young talent to be, potentially touted as an All-Australian contender, I definitely think Darcy Wilmot's resume this year stacks up amongst some of the better key position players. He's definitely having some sort of year. 2 votes I gave to Jai Amiss. He had 15 disposals, 6 were contested, 6 marks, 1 tackle, 163 metres gained, 4 goals and 10 score involvements. And best on ground, to me anyway, was Zach Bailey. 30 disposals, 9 were contested, 4 marks, 2 tackles, 6 clearances, 591 metres gained, 1 goal assist, and 8 score involvements. Interesting watch moving forward, because Fremantle are probably at a point at their run right now where they would rather start losing games at this point of the season than dropping them at the back end. They do have a game in hand, but they're taking on North Melbourne this week. And it's games like North Melbourne that they have opportunity to not only get one up on the rest of the competition, but build percentage. Because percentage now with this wildcard configuration plays so much more into the pocket than what people realise. Brisbane, boy, they play Gold Coast this week at People's First, then they play Richmond in Hobart, and most would say, okay, they're going to dog walk Richmond, but Richmond in Hobart, when they're underperforming like this and potentially could walk into this game having lost 4 of their last 4, if they lose to Richmond, fuck, there's got to be questions asked, but they've got to find some sort of normalcy to their game. They've got to get continuity back, because if they finish in that wildcard configuration and they lose to, say, 10th place and don't play finals, shit. The next game at Marvel Stadium saw the Bulldogs hosting Collingwood. Now, 2 weeks ago, the Bulldogs at Marvel narrowly escaped defeat at the hands of Melbourne at that same location, and they have come out back-to-back weeks, and they have come out by the skin of their teeth again. 4 points the better. And this was a performance that kind of has me eating my words a little bit, because a couple of weeks back, I questioned whether or not the list that the Bulldogs have is solid enough to take them forward in the way of their A graders and then their B graders, so their second tier players, having too big of a gap between. But over the last couple of weeks, we've seen players like Riley West this season. We have seen Riley Sanders, especially over the last 3 to 4 weeks, really start coming into their own, and it's really starting to make myself question whether I was being a little bit too harsh with my comments. They definitely do have talent on that tier that is ready to step up and become A grade talent. The only issue I see for the foreseeable future for them is I feel players like Riley Sanders are going to be susceptible to being targeted by Tasmania when they come into the fold. We know Riley Sanders has actively been floated as a player that Tasmania might be interested in, and with them starting to play into form, does that now put them on the radar to be picked up by opposition clubs? That's something that the Bulldogs are going to have to deal with in due course. But this was a game that was, as I said, a game of the round contender, really. It was back and forth, both teams taking the lead, both teams having players rise to the occasion, and it was just one of those blockbuster feeling games that as a neutral supporter you love to watch. Breaking down the match timeline, it was the Bulldogs for majority of this game. Early in the piece, it was an arm wrestle back and forth, and it started blowing out in proportions that it looked like the Bulldogs were going to run away with this comfortably, but Collingwood just kept finding ways to dig deep. Quarter time was a narrow lead to the Bulldogs, 4-4-28 to 3-3-21. 7-7-49 led 4-8-32 at halftime. 11-10-76 led 8-10-58 at three-quarter time, and the final scoreline was 14-13-97. Defeating 13-15-93. Some very gettable goals in that final term for Collingwood that went begging and ultimately cost them. But it was performances like Ed Richards, for example. Three-quarter time, 12 disposals, one of his lowest effort games, I feel, for the year. And then to finish on 24 disposals, 2 goals, a handful of score assists and score involvements. It just goes to show that a player can turn it on at any time. When Bontempelli was getting heavily tagged and had little to no influence in that final term, Ed Richards rises to the occasion. And this is where I start to question whether or not I've been a bit harsh on the Bulldogs. So if a Bulldogs fan has come along and catching this video, I apologise to each and every one of you, because you guys have shown over the last couple of weeks, especially with the injuries that you've had to key personnel, Sam Darcy, Tim English in and out, no Liberatore, other players collectively. Haven't had Rory Lobb for a consistent amount of time. He's only just come back into the mix. Very much so key components around the place that you do rely on to get result. You do rely on Liberatore's grunt work in the midfield. You do rely on Darcy to chop out with Norton. You do rely on having a fit Rory Lobb. You do rely on having to have Tim English in that ruck line. You're doing it with Marcus Bontempelli playing on one leg as well. He's due to have a break soon. I don't know whether they give him an extended break, whether the bye will be enough, but he has been beaten and bashed, and he's hobbling out there, and he is still putting on some great performances. It was great from a neutral perspective to see the Bulldogs rise to the occasion. Was fantastic. But then on the flip side of things, you look at it from a Collingwood perspective. Now, obviously, they have lost Jamie Elliott 2 weeks ago in Scott Pendlebury's milestone game. He goes down with an ACL and he's out for the rest of the year. Now, they're heavily reliant on him as a forward to generate goals, and there's nobody in the competition, at least from a Collingwood perspective, that you would trust with ball in hand more inside 50, especially if you're needing that clutch goal. it's just a shame that Collingwood, to me, still have on paper a very solid list, and they just struggle to find continuity in their own game. I don't know whether more magnets need to be moved. I've got personal ideas that I would trial and error if I was coach, but hey, that's not me right now. That's Fly's job. But I mean, Josh Dacos as a midfielder could be something to look at, but I think that the continuity and lack of is not to the extent of the Bulldogs, but having players in and out has hampered Collingwood as well. Darcy Moore, for example, is the perfect example. Their captain, injured, comes back in, injured the same game, he's out again. He comes back, injured, out. 3 times this year, he has returned from injury and has been injured in the exact same game he has returned in. Their forward line, Tim Membry, Dan McStay, one of them is either not in the team, they're out of the team. No Jamie Elliott. Bobby Hill would add a lot of X factor right now, but he's, nowhere to be seen due to personal reasons. It's rough. I honestly thought this year Collingwood would be a top 10 to 7 finish, but it's hard to see them finishing in that kind of spectrum now, given the fact that they're playing games like this that should be very winnable by their standards, and they're letting it slip out of their hands. And this is a game where, on the stat line, Collingwood were more convincing. Disposals, 418 to 359. They had 50 more handballs, Collingwood, and they still couldn't find avenue. They had, Bulldogs still fumbled a lot of opportunity as well, because when you look at the inside 50 count, 62 to 47 the way of the Bulldogs, and the Bulldogs only managed to skip away with a 4-point win. So in that retrospect, shooting at 46.8%, that's and this game as well, this is something that blew my mind. When the Bulldogs and Collingwood play, you would expect a high free kick count, because the Bulldogs and Collingwood are both averaging over 18 free kicks a game this year. There was 17 free kicks paid for the game. That's it. 8 to the Bulldogs, 9 to Collingwood. It was the most free-flowing game that I have seen in a very long time. It was very well adjudicated. Very well adjudicated. So there's no room for, that we got robbed or anything like that, because there was fuck all free kicks paid, to be telling you the truth. Now, again, a game where one team has the better of the hitouts, but the clearance game is a hell of a lot closer. The Bulldogs had 39 hitouts to 24 and only managed to win the clearance game by 6, which I think is very impressive given the fact that they had a hell of a lot more ball around the contest, and Collingwood managed to get more stoppage clearances as well, which I think is what Collingwood's strength is at the stoppage. Just all those uncontested handballs were put to waste. They were marking plenty of it. 115 marks, Collingwood, and they were still able to get things on their terms. They still looked to kick backwards and reassess and allocate the ball where they wanted it to be, and then get that handball game going. Unfortunately, Bulldogs were able to chop it off at the chain and get to work. They were able to just stop that transition and shut it down. And sometimes Collingwood were in a position where they were getting too handball happy, and they would force themselves into error, probably maybe overplaying it just a little bit. I don't know what's up with Collingwood. Like, every year I think, they're going to be a top 8 contending team, and some people are expecting a drop-off, and that's fair. Teams do drop off at some point. But the list they have is still a contending list. They've got so much talent on that list. It's just, to have the Bulldogs get the jump as early as they did here, can we attribute that more to just the fact that it's at Marvel Stadium and the Bulldogs play better at Marvel? Is that really a thing? I don't know. Looking at the prominent players in this game, again, majority of the highest rated stars on the field are Collingwood. Outside of Matthew Kennedy, Ed Richards, Riley Sanders, Connor Buderick, and Tim English, the top 15, pretty much all Collingwood. Marcus Bontempelli, how far is he down? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Marcus Bontempelli was the 16th highest rated player on the field. 16th. And they still managed to get that big of a gap on Collingwood at one point in time. As I said, he was shut down in a big way in that final term. They said Ed Allen to him in a tagging role, and that was a sensational move by Fly, because Marcus Bontempelli's input in that game was absolutely squashed. But again, just couldn't get the job done, and it was the familiar kind of culprits on both ends that were standing tall. Matt Kennedy, Ed Richards, Riley Sanders, Tim English, Bailey Dale. For Collingwood, Jordan De Goey, Scott Pendlebury, Nick Dacos, Darcy Cameron, Braden Maynard. So it's the players you expect to rise to the occasion, and that's why this game was so hardly fought when it come down to the end of it, because all of these players have been in this, hot pot situation before. They know that when the steam starts to rise and things start to heat up, that they need to be the ones that are driving the contest, especially with younger kids around them. Bulldogs, unfortunately, just got the jump on them way too early that put Collingwood on the back foot, and when you spend a whole game chasing tail, unfortunately sometimes it's put a little bit too far out of reach, and that's what happened in this game. Collingwood have done this many times before, just allowed that early jump, and unless they can catch a team truly sleeping and get back into the game, they're always going to struggle. They can't afford to be on the back foot. And as I said, they've got the list to get in front. I just don't know where the disconnect comes from. As far as the players I voted for in this game, I did throw one vote to Scott Pendlebury. I thought his game was rather impressive, and a lot of people are suggesting that he'll hang the boots up at the end of this year. I think he ends up playing 450 if he plays on next year, and I wouldn't be surprised if he played on to get that 450 and then he called it quits. I think he goes around one more time. 33 disposals, 11 were contested, 6 marks, 2 tackles, 6 clearances, 428 metres gained, 3 goal assists, and 8 score involvements. Ed Richards, 2 votes. If it wasn't for his lift in that final term, Collingwood very well may have won this game. As I said, he had 12 touches up until three-quarter time. He ended on 24, 7 were contested, 5 marks, 3 tackles, 4 clearances, 621 metres gained, 2 goals, 9 score involvements. They needed somebody to stand tall, and with Marcus Bontempelli shut down, enter Ed Richards, the rest is history. Best on ground, however, was Jordan De Goey. His stat line in this game was absolutely incredible. 30 disposals, 6 were contested, 10 marks, 3 tackles, 4 clearances, 541 metres gained, 1 goal, 5 goal assists, 19 score involvements from 30 disposals. For every 3 disposals he was having, 2 of them were leading to a score. That is fucking insane. He, unfortunately, has games where he produces things like this, and then other games he just goes missing. I feel we haven't entered peak De Goey era yet. He's always teased it, but he's never given us that continuity, that full package. Once he delivers us a season where from start to finish he is fucking as effective as this, that's where Collingwood are at their best. Unfortunately, few and far between, which is the case. Bulldogs and Collingwood, probably around the realm at the start of the year I would have thought as being in that wildcard configuration. Bulldogs definitely, and I can see them turning the table here, especially with getting some players back in. They're still going to miss the likes of Darcy, 100%, but if they can get Liberatore back, if they can find continuity in English's game, in Lob's game, if they can solidify some more things around the contest, they can definitely get their season back on track. I think it all hinges on how fit Bontempelli can be. If he can get his body right, fit and firing, good to go. Collingwood, on the other hand, I don't know whether they shoot themselves in the foot. I don't know whether they try to chop things a little bit more than they should, if they try to get, too much of the ball to Dacos, if they're looking to get things, under pressure, they're handballing way too much and they're forcing themselves into error. Just a little bit of reassessment, I think, goes a long way, but they could definitely use some cavalry coming back in as well. We then head to TIO Traeger Park in Alice Springs, Melbourne hosting GWS. Now, there seems to be a common trend with Melbourne heading out to Alice Springs. They attempt to go all out early, they burn out pretty much early, and they end up chasing tail for the rest of the game. And this was the tail of the tape. That's exactly how this game played out. It was GWS in the end by 49 points. The match timeline shows the gradual kind of downfall. But when you hear about the statistic differentiation between the two and how GWS were able to win on the back of losing some very important stats, I really start to question where the breakdown for Melbourne came. We've seen Melbourne play some fun, exciting football of recent weeks, and this game was just a shadow of everything that they've shown over the last month and a half. It was a very hard watch as a neutral supporter to see Melbourne go down so easily, especially in the second half. But GWS is starting to find their groove. There is a resurgence going on with this club. They're finding their best. The orange tsunami is starting to roll again. And this is where this club is at their most dangerous, when they start building confidence and get momentum behind them. The match timeline, as I said, quarter time, saw GWS head in with a 2-point lead at quarter time. 4 goals straight, 24 to 3-4, 22. At halftime, GWS led 9-2-56 to 6-8, 44. At three-quarter time, it was GWS 14-3, 87, leading 8-12, 60. And the final scoreline was 19-5, 119, defeating 9-16, 70. Again, very different conversation if Melbourne were accurate in front of goal, but Melbourne have fallen into this trap many times before as well. Inaccuracy is an absolute killer, especially now in a competition where the top 8 is now top 10. This is where you need to capitalize on your opportunities. We haven't seen a wayward Melbourne side like this for a while, because Melbourne have been putting up 100+ scores consistently this year, and they failed to do so in a rather big way. Listen to this statistical breakdown. The Giants run out comfortable winners despite losing the inside 50 count by 16. Only 2 sides this year have won despite losing the inside 50 count by more than 16. No side until this particular game has won a game this year when losing the contested possession count by 10 or more, clearances by 8 or more, and inside 50s by 16 or more. So GWS lost the contested possession count, the clearance count, and the inside 50s count, and was still able to put up not only 119 points, but win by 49. Because accurate football is good football. And that's a simple statement, and people probably say, oh yeah, that's fucking real easy to say, but yeah, tell Melbourne that, right? No big injuries or anything to come out of this game, except for the hamstring to Stephen Caniglio, which I think is really damning. I think, I can't remember his name, so I'll bring it up. There is a young kid from Melbourne, I'm pretty sure, that has done an ACL or a knee injury of some description, and he's going to be out for the rest of the year. Always upsetting to see that, but statistical breakdown, let's talk about it. GWS won the disposals 408 to 329. They had, as I said, 16 less inside 50, 62 to 46. Melbourne struck at 40% efficiency inside 50 for their 62%. GWS struck at 54% from their 46. The stoppage game was won by Melbourne. Hit-outs 32 to 24. Clearances 35 to 27. Contested possessions, it wasn't much, 125 to 114. Uncontested possessions, GWS had 269 to 194. They were pushing almost a 100 disposal gap in the way of uncontested. And that's just tail of the tape, and that is what the orange tsunami is all about. 138 marks for the game against Melbourne's 85. Giants have only been averaging 90 marks a game for the season. They had 138 of the bastards. Oh boy, this is going to be fun, because we can now turn attention and just see who all those markers were, and I could probably guarantee it was all defensive efforts, and oh, you're not wrong. Connor Iden, having a very underrated season this year. I would almost argue he's got all Australian form behind him. 29 disposals, he took 14 marks. Lockie Ash, 11 marks. Lockie Whitfield, 10 marks. Harry Himmelberg, 10 marks. Sam Taylor, first game back, ended up having a bit of a concern. It was a cramp, but some people might have thought he did his hamstring again. But he had 9 marks. Unreal. Jaden Laverde in defense had 7. Max Gawn had 8. The next best after that was 6 from Turner. Incredible. Absolutely incredible. This GWS is just getting into fine form. Into really fine form. They're not one to be written off. Like, GWS have had games this year where obviously they got convincingly beaten by West Coast, and a lot of people at that point in time would have said GWS can't win. But then they come out and they put on performances like this, and the performance they put on the week prior, you can't fault GWS at their best. I would argue, when fully fit, they have one of the best teams on paper in the competition. They have a top 3, top 4 list. They have a top 4 team list comfortably. No Josh Kelly on the wing this year due to injury. No Tom Green. Sam Taylor's only just come back. No Jesse Hogan. You can start naming more key players here. Tom Green alone changes the complexion of this midfield. Tom Green, Clayton Oliver, and Finn Callahan in that midfield would run roughshod on any other opposing midfield. I'm choking on my own words. I'm getting excited. It wasn't without effort. Max Gawn put in a stellar performance, and I thought he was actually probably the best ruckman over the course of the weekend. Tom Sparrow digging deep as well, yet to re-sign with Melbourne. Will he go elsewhere? I think people are starting to get some whispers around. But outside of that, it is all GWS. Trent Rivers and Jake Bowie pop up, but then GWS. Out of the top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Out of the top 20 rated players, 4 of them were Melbourne. 16 of them were GWS. In a game where, again, they lost contested possession, they lost inside 50, they lost clearance, they lost hit-outs, it's just, it doesn't sit right? It just, everything went Melbourne's way and they just let it slip out of their hands. They showed a lot of promise in that first half, but as they've done historically at this ground, they burn out late and GWS ran away with the game. GWS seem to be one of those teams that are a bit of a slow burn themselves. They might start a little bit slow, but once they start building that momentum through the game, they are very hard to stop. And can they finish in that wildcard configuration? I personally think they will. I think they're going to finish 9th or 10th this year, and they could be one of those teams that shouldn't be in the top 8, but win their wildcard game and could cause some damage come September if everything falls their way. When it comes to the votes for this game, I did fall on the wayside of 3 players. An honourable mention going to Connor Iden. He's having a year. As I said, he should be nominated for All-Australian this year, and not many people would have expected that given your Lockie Whitfields, your Lockie Ashes, players like that, but very underrated and under the radar. I did give one, however, to Toby Green. 16 disposals, 4 contested, 6 marks, 6 tackles, 1 clearance, 407 metres gained, 3 goals, 2 goal assists, and 8 score involvements. The 2 vote I gave to Lockie Ash. A defensive move into the midfield, kind of more defensive in this game, but still had 34 disposals, 6 of which were contested, 11 marks, 1 tackle, 569 metres gained, and 5 score involvements. And best on was Finn Callahan, really starting to build some form. 31 disposals, 8 were contested, 7 marks, 2 tackles, 4 clearances, 797 metres gained, 2 goals, 1 goal assist, 8 score involvements. Now, both of these clubs here should very well be in contention for finals. Melbourne have been playing a very fun brand. They've dropped this game here, but as we have seen with clubs like Geelong, Melbourne won't rest on their laurels. They will use this as a learning experience and they will build upon it. GWS take every bit of momentum and confidence out of this game and start applying it to everything moving forward. And once they get Hogan back in, once they get, Sam Taylor getting more games into the system, they've just solidified their back 6 infinitely with Taylor back in, because Taylor is one of, if not the best fullback in the comp, up there with Harris Andrews. It's just his first game back. Let some ring rust kind of fall off as he gets some, exposure into the game. But this now allows Lockie Whitfield to push up the ground a bit more. This allows a Lockie Ash to get those more midfield minutes. This is going to set the tone for the rest of GWS's season. And mark my words, now that he's back and they can solidify that back half more, watch them start hitting the rise, I'm telling you. The final game of the round was over in the West, with West Coast hosting Essendon at Optus Stadium, and West Coast notching up another win for the year, sending the hapless Essendon back to Victoria, having copped another loss and still sitting on the bottom of the ladder. There is just so much to love about West Coast game, especially seeing the young kids take charge. Willem Dersma, when he gets the ball forward half, especially if he's got an open laneway to goal, I have not seen a kid look so composed with ball in hand for a very long time. Ruben Jinbi starts his career as a midfielder, gets moved to defence to play key defender. He should be All-Australian this year. As far as I'm concerned, if I was to build an All-Australian team, and I will be dropping a video soon to show who I think the All-Australian team should be at this point of the season, Ruben Jinbi is in my All-Australian team despite West Coast being in the bottom half of the ladder. And he's just gone from strength to strength, that kid. And just seeing other kids, Job Shanahan standing tall and delivering. Milan Murdoch is a find. Holy shit, is he good to watch. There is so much excitement about seeing the Eagles play good football. And it's just unfortunate that with a young team, sometimes continuity is hard to bottle. And there's going to be weeks where they lose and they get beaten convincingly. But when they can recollect themselves and put in performances like this, it is great to watch as a neutral supporter. Now, on the flip side of that as well, Essendon, they might have some outs, but I mean, you'd expect, and as I said this with Richmond as well, you'd expect with the 23 that you're sending out on the weekend that they can deliver. And this was a rather hard watch as well. Only kicking 2 goals in the first half, only registering 1 behind in the first quarter. Not really up to snuff. But you might be able to attribute the weather to this, because there were severe storms happening in the West. There were winds of up to 125 kilometers an hour going down, so you could see when balls were getting kicked towards goal how bad they were drifting at any given time. But at any rate, 2-5-17 led 1 behind at quarter time, 5-6-36 led 2-4-16 at half time, 10-10-70 led 4-5-29 at 3/4 time, and 12-13-85 defeated 8-7-55. I feel maybe West Coast took the pedal, took the foot off the gas a little bit by the end of the game. Just eased up a little bit. That maybe could be attributed to some of the youngsters not having developed big enough tanks to run games out yet. Whether, given the weather conditions, they were happy to take the sting out of the game a little bit and kind of ice it. Because there was a period of time where it just stagnated and there was no scoring. It was just maintaining football. And to their credit, if that's something you're going to do, they did it incredibly well. This was West Coast's 4th win of the year. I don't know whether many expected them to maybe win 4 games this year, especially what we saw last year from them. The intercept game of their midfield core was sensational. They had 36 intercept possessions from their midfield core for the game, which as a young group is incredibly impressive. And from those 36 intercepts, they ended up putting 35 points on the scoreboard, which if you look at the game decided by 30 points, it was that midfield work that had them go, to town and get those scores on the board that won them the game. It's very funny because for West Coast midfield group to register 36 midfield intercept possessions, Essendon dominated the clearance by 21. And yet it was West Coast midfielders that were able to get ascendancy from that. It's the second best. That 21 gap for Essendon is the second best registered clearance differentiation of the season. They were unable to convert from clearance, however, as it states here as I'm reading it. They turned the ball over to the midfield and lose the inside 50 count by 14, which is the 6th time this year they have lost the inside 50 count by 10 or more. So it's proof in the pudding as unfortunate as that does sound. May for Essendon did go down with an injury that didn't see him play out the game, which again is unfortunate, just compacts that injury list a little bit more. But statistically, it was pretty even, Steven. I mean, West Coast won the disposal count 389 to 373. They had 15 more inside 50s, 55 to 40. The free kick count, I mean, we were talking about only 17 paid before. This game had over 40 paid, so use that as you will. Essendon won the hitouts. They dominated the clearance, especially at stoppage. They won the stoppage clearance 32 to 14. All other stat lines, I mean, Eagles marked the ball more, 99 marks to 68. They were just able to shut things down. Tackles inside 50, Essendon had 18, which is double what they do on any other occasion. So they were applying plenty of forward pressure. They just weren't getting reward for effort, unfortunately. Just failing to register any scores from all 40 inside 50s. 40 inside 50s, 18 tackles inside 50, and they only managed to kick 8 goals. I don't know, it's really rough. I mean, the biggest talking point out of this game comes to the fact that Essendon are apparently piecing together a proposal to the AFL for an assistance package in which they want more draft picks, I believe it is. Now, might be a little bit harsh here, might be speaking out of turn, but at least when North Melbourne and West Coast applied for their packages, they were on the bottom of the ladder for 3 to 4 years, finding it hard to win games, struggling really bad, deserving of that. Essendon might have only won a handful of games out of their last, 12 months, but they still collectively haven't been finishing bottom 2. Like, this is the first time that they've petered out as bad as they have, and as soon as they have, they're wanting a handout? I don't get it, especially when they had the opportunity to get rid of Zach Merritt last year via a trade and pick up 2 to 3 first-round picks. Brad Scott, on the way out, has already sat interviews and has already said, from his perspective, he would have traded Zach Merritt last year, but the club didn't want to. Do with that as you will. I mean, I honestly feel if any team right now is really needing a handout, maybe Richmond could use an assistance package. We've been in the bottom 2 teams for the last 3 years, haven't won many games, and we've been impacted by fuckloads of injury this year, so having extra players there, extra draft picks, might be a little bit handy, but shoot me. I'm probably going a little bit overboard here with my comments. When it comes to individual performances in this game, outside of Zach Merritt and Will Setterfield, a lot of people shit on Will Setterfield, but I'm telling you, whenever he gets the chance to come into this lineup, he has impact. He finds plenty of the ball. He brings teammates into the game. I think he is undeservingly thrown under the bus way more often than he should be. But outside of him, Dersma, Parrish, and Merritt, maybe Sartis as well, it's just West Coast. Everywhere. And you can start listing them. Dersma, McCarthy, Waterman, Murdoch, Young, Kelly, Duggan, Ginby, Reed, Yeo, Lindsay, Allen. A very good young list. We've had conversations before about it. I honestly think longevity, once all of these young kids, they've hit their straps, they've all got 50 games under their belt, there's going to be a turning point. When Tasmania comes into this competition and takes all these draft picks away from other clubs, teams like Geelong, Collingwood, Sydney, all these clubs that have older talent that all start to retire, are all going to start dropping off, and you're going to see teams like Richmond, Essendon, West Coast all start rising because their young kids are going to be hitting their straps at the right time. West Coast have an exciting list. I really love what West Coast bring to the table. It's just unfortunate from a neutral point of view to see them perform so well like this, but they're easily as susceptible to go out next week and lose by 100 points. That's reality. That's where West Coast is at. If they can find more continuity in their game like this, boy, the sky's the limit for them. It really is. And they're hosting Port Adelaide this week at home, and I have tipped West Coast to beat Port Adelaide. We've seen them knock them off in Adelaide. They're playing at home back to back, and then the following game, they're playing at home as well. Can West Coast win their next 2? Who knows? Start getting on a roll. Start making some moves. I feel I've stiffed some players for votes in this game. Waterman could have been voted for. I could have voted for Dersma as well, but the three I have landed on. I landed on Tom McCarthy for the one vote. I thought his defensive game was great. 26 disposals, 7 were contested, 8 marks, 2 clearances, 340 metres gained, 1 goal and 8 score involvements. The 2 vote I gave to Ruben Jinby. He could have very well been best on in this game. As I said, he's only got 5 marks listed here for the game, but just his defensive work, his spoiling, his shutdown, his one-on-one pressure is absolutely incredible. He had 17 disposals, 8 were contested, 5 marks, 4 tackles, 307 metres gained, and the 6 score involvements. And I'm giving best on to Milan Murdoch. This could have easily been a 2 and 3 vote switch, but Milan Murdoch, when they needed someone to stand tall, he just started getting involved in everything. 19 disposals, 10 were contested, 2 marks, 4 tackles, 1 clearance, 288 metres gained, 3 goals, 1 goal assist, and 8 score involvements. A lot to love about West Coast, a lot to be desired about Essendon, and it could only get worse for Essendon from here. My personal take, with all this fucking talk about James Hird being the man for them, I don't think it should be. If Essendon choose to live in nostalgia and want to bring their favourite son back, do it at your own detriment, because I don't think he's improving your club. I would rather see them target a James Kelly, who has been tutored under Brad Scott, has been under a winning system. We've seen what Stephen King has gone and done with Melbourne this year under the tutelage of Brad Scott. Bring in James Kelly, let him have a crack. I think it could be the turning point. If Josh Fraiser doesn't coach Carlton, James Kelly would be a good pickup for them as well. I'm just saying, James Kelly could be ripe for the picking as a coach. But yeah, 2 teams on opposite ends of the spectrum here. One I love to watch, one not so much. Before we get into the votes collectively for this round, I didn't drop a video for last round. So on screen right now, you're going to see all the votes I did for round 11. Feel free to peruse and pause and do what you need to. But transitioning from that and adding those votes to the leaderboard as well as this round's votes, this is how the leaderboard now sits, and I'm going to start showing not just the top 5, we're rounding off the top 10 just to show you where some other players might be situated. So on screen now, from 1st to 10th, Bailey Smith leading the MVP this year on 21 votes. In 2nd place on 18 votes, we have Zach Butters. In 3rd place on 17 votes, we have Nick Dacos. In 4th place on 16 votes, we have Harry Sheasel and Isaac Heaney. In 5th place on 15 votes, we have Marcus Bontempelli. In 6th place on 13 votes, we have Luke Jackson. In 7th place on 12 votes, we have Shea Bolton and Brodie Grundy. In 8th place on 11 votes, we have Christian Petrarca, Tristan Cherry, Luke Davies-Uniacke, and Patrick Cripps. In 9th place on 10 votes, we have Nasiah Wanganeen-Malira and Max Holmes. And in 10th place on 9 votes, we have Max Gawn, Jason Horne-Francis, and Connor McDonald. Yeah, hi, so it's future me. I'm sitting here trying to edit this video for you all at home and realised I completely forgot to talk about how the ladder looks after 12 rounds of football, because I'm an absolute idiot. So, this is how it looks. In 1st place, a game ahead, we have Fremantle on 44. Sydney sit in 2nd on 40. Hawthorn sit in 3rd on 34. And Geelong sit in 4th on 32. Rounding out the top 6, we have the Gold Coast Suns and Melbourne on 28, with Western Bulldogs sitting in 7th with 28 as well. Following that, to round out the wildcard rounds, we have 8, 9 and 10, Adelaide, Brisbane and GWS, all on 24 points respectively. Collingwood sit in 11th on 22, St Kilda in 12th and North Melbourne in 13th on 20, Carlton in 14th and West Coast in 15th, both with 16. Port Adelaide in 16th with 12. Richmond in 17th with 8. And then Essendon in 18th place with 4 singular points. And now we can get back to the video. Thank you. There is only one thing left for us to do before the round is officially recapped, and that is to announce my team of the week for round 12. And this is where we landed. In defence, I have Ruben Jinby and Darcy Wilmot in the back pockets and Tom McCartan at full back, with Nick Blakey and Lockie Ash on the half-back flanks and James Sicily at centre-half back. Bailey Smith and Ed Richards are on the wings, with Isaac Heaney as this week's captain in the centre, with Max Gawn as ruck, Patrick Cripps as this week's vice captain in Ruck Rover, and Finn Callahan as Rover. My forward line sees Jordan De Goey and Chad Warner on the half forward flanks, and Jack Gunston at centre half forward, with Nick Watson and Milan Murdoch in the forward pockets, and Charlie Curnow at full forward. My bench consists of Sam Walsh, Scott Pendlebury, Connor McDonald, Jai Amos, and Zach Bailey. Coach of the round is Josh Fraiser, and assistant coach of the round is Justin Longmuir. With all that out of the way, the round has been officially recapped. Thank you all for joining me once more. If you did enjoy the video, I would appreciate it if you hit that like button down below. It goes a long way if you hit that like button to letting YouTube know that I've done something right, and helps push the video and get the algorithm working. So all it takes, a little bit of your time, just click it. I'd appreciate it. And if you want to get on board the community we are building together, hit that subscribe button as well. As far as content goes, if you've got any suggestions, I would love to hear it. Let me know in the comments down below. I do have plans to do my mid-year All-Australian team, my mid-year Best 22 under 22, so do keep your eyes out for that. And given the fact that the round kicks off later on tonight, this video was dropped a little bit later in the week than I would have liked to. I apologise, but we're back on track. We're getting things done, and I hope you guys are enjoying what I'm putting out. But that's it from me, guys. I'm out of here, and as always, I will catch you guys next time.